Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 236th episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser, and you can find me on Twitter at HawkBlogger. We have some fun stuff to talk about tonight. You may even see movement from every member of our panel, not just myself and Dayna and Jeff. Currently, Nathan has a member of the Guinness Book of World Records in his house, and he is going for the longest time that anyone has held one facial expression in the history of the world. So buckle up. You could be in for history tonight. We don't know if he's going to be able to pull it off. We are excited to see if he can do it, but we're all about competing on the Real Hawk Talk pod, and Nathan's right there with us. So gonna open the show today by just saying, folks, if you haven't already given the show a like, subscribe to the channel, go to patreon.com/hawkblogger and join. Now is absolutely the time to do it. We are in the playoff push. You are going to get some of the most fun conversation. Whatever happens with the Seahawks the rest of the way, we've got the Seahawks to talk about. We've got the draft picks to talk about. We've got just all sorts of silly weirdness to talk about. And now's the time to join. Patreon.com/hawkblogger. And as a matter of fact, today's a special day. Tonight's a special night. After much ado and trying to figure out where we were going to do it and who we were going to do it for, normally we give our annual donation to Ben's Fund. Done it for years, and John and Tracy Snyder are super big supporters of the show and have been great to us and to our supporters. Couple things happened this year. One was that they didn't actually get organized to do a fundraiser. And secondly, not to be a total downer, but the reality is I had a pretty big tragedy in my life. Really, really close friends of ours lost their daughter to a drug overdose. And she was just 21 years old, same age as my oldest kid. And she had struggled with, all sorts of demons along the way. And so I'm actually really, really happy to be able to say that we made a donation in her memory to NAMI, which is the National Association of Mental. I'm forgetting the last one. It's not institution. National Association. Mental illness. Thank you. Thank you. Mental illness. And they're a great organization. They help people before they get to some of these challenges. And we were able to donate $40,000 to NAMI on behalf of her, and could only do that with all of your support. So all proceeds from the blog plus additional donations from Rachel and I go to our charity of the year. And so really, really, really happy to make that donation. Thanks to all of you for supporting the blog. Thank you for being a patron. All of that stuff helps contribute to doing really good for the world. And double bonus, you get to have fun talking Seahawks with a lot of cool people. So patreon.com/hawkblogger. Great time to join. Great gift to give. You can also go to hawkblogger.com, click the store, buy some merch. There's actually some awesome merch. Great sweatshirt. Light hoodie is my favorite. Head over there. All sorts of ways you can support the show. All right. Let me bring in the crew. I'm going to start with Unfrozen. Can
we pause for a minute, though? Sorry, I hate to interrupt.
Yes.
But I think we just had a $100 donation in the chat.
Oh my gosh, I missed that. Thank you. Reflect the Sun. Amazing to see that. Really, really appreciate additional support for the show. That's amazing. Thank you. And excited to figure out what our cause will be next year. So really, really, really appreciate that. That's amazing. Thank you for your generosity.
I will go ahead and just match that to NAMI real quick.
I love it. I love it. This is fantastic. You guys are the best. Nathan actually, not to diminish what he's doing, but like he had to find some way to donate after last year. Like, I think he was like, I don't want to say how much, but he put a lot of money towards charity because of a bad bet on Jason Myers, I think. So this is great. Great way
Yeah,
to.
it was great watching Seahawks games with my wife, and the Jason Myers field goals all got a little tense there towards the end of the year.
Absolutely. Awesome, Nathan. Thank you. I'm all choked up on the macadamia nuts I just ate. But that was Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. Again, he is frozen in time forever. This is going to be an interesting thing to watch. See how long he can pull this off. Opposite of frozen is warm, and that is Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG on Twitter. Dayna, good to have you back.
Thank you. I just want to pull my inner Evan and say, clip it. Somebody has to get that picture, Nathan, because it just makes me laugh really hard. Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad to be back. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be back after a win, a squeaky win, but there'll be a lot to talk about.
That was the perfect way to describe it, like a win. Yeah, we did technically win. Yeah. Didn't feel all the way there. I loved that, Dayna.
Yeah,
expert delivery. I do have to say, I wish it was a feature of the streaming software that I could pause each of you whenever I wanted and certain really awkward facial expressions. I would have a lot of fun with that.
Definitely.
It's too much power.
It is. And so last but not least, going from frozen to warm to probably frozen again in the great north of Canada, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons, the newly engaged Jeff Simmons. If you haven't already congratulated him, make sure you do. How's it going, Jeff? Have like you given up control of your life yet? Has that happened?
Yeah, frozen's a pretty good word to describe what's going on with me. So
Dana's so offended.
It's true.
Kinda, yeah.
It's good to be back. This might be a first for our podcast. I think I might have the best internet tonight.
Oh my gosh. What, am I frozen too?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll find out about all that. There's a lot of places to go. We have a little bit of a formula how we talk about the past game, and I'm going to go off the rails here. So there's a couple stories that came out that caught my attention. I'm curious about you guys. The first is a little salacious and probably silly to talk about. So that's exactly why I'm going to start with it. Did you guys see this article that came out from some, I think SB Nation writer? I mean, some nothing, but whatever. But basically the story was the reason that Russ is struggling is partially because he pays for his own quarterback coach, who is Jake Heaps. And, what does he think he's doing, bringing his own coach into there? Did you guys see this story? I've seen Dayna nod.
Yeah, and then the Twitter fight that ensued afterwards.
What was the Twitter fight? I did not see the Twitter fight.
Well, Ben Albright, out of Denver, for those of you guys who don't follow him, he's a radio guy in Denver, and he's not unbiased to the Broncos. We'll just say that. Okay. That's just, he's not, but I followed him. We followed each other for years, but he got into it with a couple people who were like, that's absurd. That's the crazy things. Professional quarterbacks do not have quarterback coaches. And he's like, actually they do. And so there was a whole argument back and forth about whether that was a logical thing. Don't you have coaches on your team? It was really bizarre. But for those of you who don't know, lots of quarterbacks have quarterback coaches.
Yeah, Jeff, I don't know about you, but okay, I've got to admit something. This is embarrassing. I've loved Jake and Stacey's show, Jake Heaps, Stacey Rost. It was probably my favorite Seattle sports radio show last year. I've basically just not listened to any sports radio for a while. I just, for whatever reason, I was like, where's Jake? Sometimes I'm in my car and I'll turn it on and it's just Stacey with Michael Bumpus or something. I'm like, what happened to Jake? And I never put any time into figuring it out. I had no idea that he had left 710, and I definitely had no idea that he left to be Russell Wilson's personal quarterback coach and moved to Denver with him. So like I missed it on Twitter too, I guess. Like I would assume that would have been a big deal, but maybe it just all happened around the time he got traded and it got lost in the shuffle for me. I don't know. Jeff, do you know much about that, or did you follow that story at all?
Like, I remember it happened, and then he kind of has gone into the shadows. He hasn't been very active, and I wonder, like, if he thought the Seahawks were going to become a sinking ship, and that was probably a better career move to get out while the team was about to fade into irrelevance. And I do wonder that, but no, until the story, he's been like almost like a super quiet figure. Like, no one's really talked about him. Today they come out of the blue with this, and they're so down in Denver. They're reaching for all elements to find who to blame, and to come out and blame Jake. And like, we know, if you followed Russell at all in his career, you know what he's like with his own personal people. And he had the masseuse live in his house and all this kind of things. Like, to come out and blame Jake Heaps for everything that's gone on there when there's so many other issues there, it just felt kind of dirty. And like, I saw Stacey go on a rant about it. It felt like crossing a line of some sorts. And sure, you can blame all the stuff around Russell, but to like single out Jake Heaps is the issue with what's going on there. It just felt gross.
Yeah, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but like part of the reason it jumped out to me is like, first of all, I like Jake Heaps. He's been on the show. He is a good guy. He is like a local guy. He's been good to Seattle. I don't have any issue with Jake Heaps. Like, he's a good family guy as far as I know. Like, so he's a good dude, and I just don't like it when good dudes get their names dragged through the mud. And then the other is like, it's very odd to me that people are like, I've been having as much fun with the Russell situation as anybody, but like, am I really going to criticize the guy for paying his own money to bring on additional coaching if he thinks that will help? Like, do you criticize guys for investing in trainers and additional like hyperbaric chambers and all this stuff that they do to take care of their bodies? People talk about they spend $1 million a year sometimes, some of these pro athletes, investing in themselves to keep themselves healthy and better. I don't know. Like, the whole story to me was like, geez, man, like, it has reached the point where they are so upset they're going to tear apart anybody and anything. And Russ, if they're at this point, man, it's gonna be tough. I also didn't know, going back to the other side, I didn't know Russ had his own office.
Does that surprise you though?
It did, honestly. Like, that's pretty shitty. Like, to have your own, that could have been the whole story to me. Like, that I was like, you're like separating yourself from the team like that. Whoa.
You would never do that.
So anyway, that story jumped out at me as like, wow, like, I just had to talk about it for a second. The other one, Dayna, I know you read it because I read it too, and I shared it on Twitter. Not a current Seahawk, but one of the best past Seahawks was on the front page of the Seattle Times today, Doug Baldwin. And I'm always happy when I open the paper in this morning. Of course, it's digital now. I don't really open it, but when I launch it, and if I see Doug, that's just a great moment. So tell folks what he's doing. Like, how did he make the front page?
So, I mean, we all know that Doug Baldwin has kind of always, gone to the beat of his own drum. Like, this is just who he is. He wasn't a prototypical NFL guy. He was quiet. He was always really introspective, and we called him Angry Doug Baldwin for a reason, because he looked pissed off all the time, but he really is such a good dude. So they did a story today on him about this committee that he's in. And the headline freaked me out. I'm not going to lie, because the headline is ex-Seahawk Doug Baldwin will help decide on 6 lives that hang in the balance. I thought, what the hell is that? Like, it had no explanation. And so it was very fascinating to me. Apparently, Doug Baldwin is now part of a obscure state board that actually goes and for the prison system, and they consider whether people convicted of murder or other years, drive-by shootings, things, armed robbery, should be freed from prison. And it's this separate board. I guess it's been around for a while, and he was just appointed to it. I don't know if it was just this year, but it's been pretty recently. And they look over the cases, and then they give their recommendation. What's interesting about this is he's on there with lawyers, civil rights attorneys, a court reporter, a bailiff, a dean of a college. So, I mean, it's a very wide mix of people. And I'm seeing now it says he was appointed by Inslee in October, and he's only 34. So he's the youngest member. And in the article, it said by 2 decades. So he's very young. Now, this is not, really surprising if you realize that Doug Baldwin has always been very in the middle of, prison reform, police reform. He was right there with Kaepernick when all of that went down. So this is not really surprising, but it seemed very Doug Baldwin, didn't it? Like this seems like something he would do. Offshoot of that great work that he is doing, and I love that he is getting so involved. The other part of this article, though, that was fascinating to me was he was just talking to the reporter, and he says that he has, since the day he retired, he has not watched a full game of football, that it brings up anger and fight and completely changes his mental status when he watches it, this mental status that he would have had to be in the game. So he just has removed it from his life, which I thought was so fascinating. So it's like, oh, he really was angry, Doug Baldwin, because he really said that that's what he brought up. But I think it's great, and it's great work in that he stayed here in Seattle or in Washington, and he's trying to make a difference. And he's, I know that everyone knows this, or at least they should know this. He's insanely intelligent. He's insanely logical. And I think that's just such a great thing for him to be doing.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you get a chance to read this at all, Jeff?
No, I actually didn't. I saw the headline and I had the same reaction as Dayna. I'm like,
it was weird.
It was weird. I'm like, something doesn't add up here because everyone's talking about cool is. And then I got caught up in a bunch of other things today. I ended up listening to like the full KJ Wright hour. On the
yeah,
I want to come to that next. Actually,
man,
so that's an interesting thing as well.
That show is great. Like I'm like you. I'm not listening to a lot of sports radio this year, but I listen to that show when I'm driving every week. It's really good.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that in just a second. Just to wrap up quick on Doug, like, this is just the guy that folks that have followed this show and followed the blog for a while know that I know Doug, and so. I'm certainly biased in his direction, although he and I have had a lot of pretty, confrontational conversations over the years about decisions he's made and things I've said and whatever. So like we're pretty close on that regard, but he, his dad was a cop. He is a brilliant black man, growing up, experiencing all the things that other black men in this country experience. Going to Stanford, most people assuming he's an athlete and not a scholar. This is a guy that was going to work at Tech coming out of Stanford, ended up being as an undrafted free agent, making it in the NFL, but he had a job. I believe it was at like Dropbox, like coming out of school. So like this is guy's just, he's a special person. He could run for office and be effective there. When he got involved with the, all the stuff that was going on in terms of race relations and the police force and things like that, while everyone else was yelling at each other, he was going around interviewing judges, prisoners, families, every policeman, like everybody he could to learn. He just listened and learned for a while, and then came out with some just really wise perspectives on what is a super complicated topic. And I just, I get a lot of pleasure out of watching Doug's evolution. He's now the CEO of a company. He and I talked a bunch about, like, he was at an incubator, or like basically a venture fund for a while, and then has decided to take over one of the companies. So, just a really, really cool person, and so proud that he was a Seahawk, and really curious to see what he does next. So enough on Doug. Jeff, you mentioned another former Seahawk, KJ Wright, who's got a show on with Mike Salk and Brock Heward on 710. When does that show happen every week? Is it Tuesdays, Wednesdays?
It's Wednesday. I don't know the hour, but I always listen to their show on like the podcast version. So
okay. So Wednesday show. And what was the topic this week? They
covered all sorts of things. They started talking about the Rams game, and the defensive adjustment that Pete claimed that they made, what he saw defensively, and then they talked a lot about Geno. And then they got into some like old stories because Pete had mentioned like how the game with Bobby had brought up how like practices used to be because how fired up everyone was. And then they start just going in and like reminiscing about old Seahawks teams. And he told some stories about like Jimmy Graham and Percy. And it's funny hearing like Brian's perspective of that trade and then hearing KJ, and it was almost identical. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but it was very like KJ just doesn't hold back. And like he was talking about how he doesn't like Jalen Ramsey and all kinds of stories. So I found it really interesting. It like flies by because KJ is just very honest.
Yeah, he had some near misses on social this year, so he narrowly survived that. But I mean, one of the topics there that I think you and I went back and forth on is, I mean, the run defense for the Seahawks has been just. I get like even just saying the Seahawks run defense, my blood pressure picks up. I'm so pissed about it. It drives me freaking nuts to watch bad run defense. It drives me crazy to watch bad defense in general, but run defense is maybe the worst. And he talked about like how they were struggling in the 3-4 to defend it early on with the Rams, and they made an adjustment. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Like one of the things that KJ has been saying all year, because it's been a constant topic, has been the run defense. And so KJ's been kind of explaining why they've been struggling. A lot of it has to do with like the bear front, and Nathan would be good to talk about this too. The bear front they're running in the 3-4 scheme, and how it just leaves some holes. And some of the guys they have playing in the front right now, Poona Ford and Shelby Harris, they're really good at penetrating. But he was explaining today how when they're set up in bear, they're good at penetrating, but they're not good at holding blocks. The two of them, they said only Al is doing well at it. So it left a massive hole in their scheme. He called it the C gap, and Nathan was explaining that in further detail in our chat. And he said the scheme that they're running in the 3-4 is leaving a giant hole in their C gap, and that's why McVay kept attacking that early in the game. That's why they were just moving the ball at will. And all year, KJ's been wondering, like, when's Pete going to go back to what he knows, which are the over fronts and what they've been doing. And like Brian mentioned the other day, like they were top 5 in the league in run defense. And I know they did some bear front last year, but so KJ said after the second drive, they went to those over fronts, which guys like Poona and Shelby, and they were able to move Bruce Irvin into the C gap. So they're playing more of the traditional Pete Carroll defense that kind of fit their personnel. And Bruce Irvin went to that gap. And after that, until that last drive, it looked like a normal defense. But all year he's been saying this 3-4 doesn't work with the players they have. And like you have the 3 linemen and the 2 edge guys, and that's supposed to be 5-on-5 against the O-line. But the players they have don't really suit. 2 of the 3 linemen aren't great at eating up those blocks, and some of their edge rushers are probably new to this. So they're really limited in run defense, and it's not surprising why they broke so often because A, they might not have the personnel to run it, and B, they just might not be good at it.
Yeah, I mean, Dayna, you and I are defensive obsessed. And without getting too technical, because it's probably beyond me anyway. What I can say is like Pete Carroll's defense that he came in with back to the NFL at least was a 4-3 over defense where 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and you had a strong side linebacker that basically was right over the tight end. So you had this like really strong front, no pun intended, for run defense. And it was very clear the guys on the edges, your defensive linemen, were like 250 to 275 pound guys that were able to set the edge. And that all made sense. Now they've got a situation where they've gone to 3-4. They've gone to this bear front. So they have 3 down linemen that are big, burly dudes, Al Woods, Shelby Harris, those guys, but they're really close together. And you've got 4 linebackers, 2 inside, 2 outside, flanking that line. And Uchenna Nwosu is like one of those guys. These are smaller dudes.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah.
fast, but they're smaller. And we saw in the very first game of the season, the Broncos ran to the outside and there was miles on the outside. They couldn't control the outside. And then now we're seeing people run right up the middle as well on them. So the fact that KJ Wright says, hey, they were playing this bare front and they switched to a 4-3 over, to me is like, I am starting to lose confidence in this scheme change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to wonder if it's time to go back to what Pete knows.
Well, I think he was giving, and I don't know. I mean, none of us know, right? But I think he was trying to give Clint some leeway. Okay, see what you can do with this. Give him a little room. See if they can change this out. Now, that's not to say Pete doesn't have a part in it, because we know he's a defensive coach, right? We get it. But what I did see in this game, and the credit that I will give to our defensive coordinator, is they were quicker to make the change. Like, there were some games where they stuck with that. I mean, the Raiders game, I mean, Jesus, their number one player is a running back. Do something about it, right? But they were quicker to make that change. He hopped on it quicker. And so I don't know if they think they're going to scheme each individual team. Oh, we'll try this. But teams know now, there's no question they can run on Seattle. The other problem with having the 4 linebackers is these are linebackers outside of Nwosu who have a really hard time tackling most of the time. Now, yes, I know, Jordan Brooks has the most tackles in football right now or something like that. I think he's like number 1 or close up there at the top. But from what I'm saying is, if then you have these guys, there's holes, and then you have linebackers who aren't tackling, it's not going to make sense. They're going to run on you every single time. And so I'm hoping that what they're seeing is their number one problem. He fixed it after the first quarter. In Ernst's press conference today, he was very proud of that, that they had switched it up so quickly. And I'm wondering if then the change will be, especially with McCaffrey coming up and some of these other good runners, that they'll switch up and just go back to what they know and what works.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that jumped out for me there, Jeff, was they were doing 8-man fronts. So everyone's like, hey, let's dedicate extra men to the box. They were. And they weren't just getting like still run on. They were getting gashed. And so like some of that's talent. We've talked about it. But when it's this bad, and when we've seen this wild swing with the same personnel where they're good and then they're awful, it starts to me to feel like this is a lot about scheme. And so if it's scheme, and people are talking about Sean Desai, I see that in the chat. Sean Desai was brought up for secondary. That's his focus point. Carl Scott are secondary. And frankly, the secondary can be one coverage, and you can play different fronts under different coverages. So they can continue to play a 2-deep safety look if they want, limit big plays, and have a different front 7. But in any event, like, do you want, Jeff, at this point with what you know, do you want to see like, hey, give them the rest of this year, give them the offseason to bring in more guys to fit this, and then make the call? And that's assuming that everyone struggles to adjust to a new scheme. It's real. Or are you like, geez Louise, like, we've got to cut bait on this scheme. We've got to go back to what we know, and we should get people in the offseason that fit that scheme, because we could be caught in between. And if they go halfway on this, we are screwed. We cannot spend these draft picks on the wrong types of players.
And yeah, I've been thinking about that a bit. And if you think about it, there's a lot of teams in the league in the last couple of years that have gone to this Fangio scheme. And a great example of what you're talking about is the Chargers. And the Chargers brought in Brandon Staley, who was Vic's right-hand man in Chicago. And he ran the scheme in the Rams that worked great against us. But since he's gone to the Chargers, they've been a disaster on defense, running the same scheme. And they've been especially bad on run defense. Like, they've been one of the worst run defenses in the league the last 2 years. I know they've had a lot of injuries, but it makes me wonder, like, there must be real emphasis on finding like very good personnel, finding the right personnel. And the gap between being good and bad seems huge, which makes me very uncomfortable, because the Chargers, who have one of the guys who ran the scheme, and they ran it well with the Rams, 2 years now where they had a lot of free agent money and a lot of draft picks, they have not been able to get it right. So it makes me a little nervous that, because again, Seattle has one guy in their front three who's really suited for that scheme. It's Al Woods. He's 35 years old. Monet's a good backup for him, but Puna and Shelby, like, you have a decision on Puna to make, number one. Like, he's a free agent after the season. If you're going to run the scheme, there's no way you can re-sign him, in my opinion. But if you're in a different scheme, he's a very valuable player to you, like he was in the past. So to me, I'm sort of like with you, Brian. If the margin for error is this huge, I mean, is this small, if you don't have the right personnel, and you see it with the Rams and the Vikings went to this scheme this year, and unless you have Aaron Donald and guys like that and you can't run it, to me, that's the wrong scheme because it's so difficult to master and so difficult to get those players. And you have all these picks coming up. To me, I would go with the scheme with a lower margin of error.
I don't know if this is realistic because of the dynamics of how it would have to play out. But my decision is significantly influenced by where this top pick is. And if I'm going to get my choice of defensive lineman, I am saying if it's Will Anderson, if it's Jalen Carter, if it's Brise, Miles Murphy, there's a bunch of guys at the top there. If I get one of those guys and Jalen Carter, let's say, and he is best suited for a 4-3, I mean, most players that are very good can play in any scheme.
Yeah.
Realistically, you can't tell me Warren Sapp wouldn't have been good in either. You can't tell me that Cortez Kennedy wouldn't have been good in either. But in any event, there are players that were more suited to one than the other. I would go to whatever best accentuates their talents, and I would then draft accordingly. You see that happen with offensive players. Like you got people with certain talents that emerge and you build a scheme around it. I think that's the type of draft you have coming up. And I don't think it's been talked about enough. People don't understand that scheme and player personnel are like two sides of a coin and make drastically different decisions based on what scheme you're running. So it would surprise me if they ran away from it at this point. I think they're going to go all in, and that's probably the right decision. Like, I don't like halfway and whiplashing, but I'm concerned for sure about what I'm seeing there. Dayna, do you have the patron questions by any chance you could?
I can pull them up. Yeah, hold on.
Awesome. So while Dana's doing that, if you have not already, click like on the show. We would really appreciate it. Click subscribe to get added to the channel. By the way, we've made chat so it's subscriber only. We do this so that we do not get dive bombed during like the 49ers shows that are going to come up where 49ers fans like to come in here and say whatever they want. Well, they can't unless they subscribe to the channel. And then even then we'll block them because it'll be fun. But click subscribe. Make sure you can always enter the chat. And then go to patreon.com/hawkblogger, get immediate access to the Slack channel, and be able to ask questions that we try to answer each and every week. Dayna, what do we have this week?
All right. So the first question is from Silk. What about and/or who on this Panthers team concerns you the most heading into this matchup this weekend? Brian, since you wrote the tail of the tape today, why don't we have you do that one?
Sorry, I was just proving a comment. Can you repeat the question?
What about and/or who on this Panthers team concerns you the most heading into the matchup this weekend?
Yeah, I wrote the tail of the tape this morning, and I already got some questions on it because my headline was that the Panthers actually have a lot of components to make the Seahawks miserable. And you look at them and you're like, well, that doesn't seem right, but it's true. So the Panthers, as one case in point, are a pretty good run team. And when they have eclipsed 100 yards rushing in a game, they are 4-2. And in the two losses, they lost both of those games by like 2 or 3 points. They're both very close. So when they go over 100 yards, they do well. They have a very good runner. He's not as well known. His name's is it Deonta Foreman or I know it's Foreman, but and he's a physical runner. He's not Josh Jacobs. Not many guys are, but he does run through tackles. He's a physical guy. And then there's other pieces where the Panthers have a pretty nice defensive line, and most people know Brian Burns, but they might not know Matt Ioannidis, and I think it's Derek Brown, interior defensive linemen. Both of those guys have 27 and 28 pressures, respectively, and that's like the Seahawks. To give you an idea, the Seahawks' leading interior rusher is Shelby Harris with 23 pressures. So they have those two guys. They have Brian Burns on the outside. They actually are the 10th ranked team in the NFL in opponent passer rating. So they're a better pass defense than they are run defense. We can't run the ball to save our lives. We can't stop the run to save our lives. We are highly dependent on the passing game, which happens to be the Panthers' strength. I think this game is like not as easy as people want to believe it to be.
Well, to be honest with you, we haven't beat a team in that division yet. So
Hey, good point.
Good Lord. All right. So the next one is Jay Brandt, DC. Have you, Jeff, this will be for you. Have you been more surprised by Waldron Gino and the offense, or more disappointed in Clint, Desai, Scott, and the defense?
More surprised with the offense. A defense has been discouraging and demoralizing, and what Brian said before was like, there's nothing more demoralizing than bad run defense. But there's just no scenario in my mind that would have ever envisioned Geno Smith being a top 5-6 quarterback. And I was texting with people around the league on Monday because I couldn't even appreciate what Geno did. I talked about in our post-game show. I was like so beaten down by the defense. And everyone I talked to was like, I can't believe how good Geno. Like, an NFC scout I know said Geno was their number 1 rated quarterback last week. And like just hearing Dan Orlovsky talk about it, and Louis Riddick had a really good interview yesterday where he was just talking about all the things that are working right now in the Seahawks offense and how it all projects for the future. Like DK had the best game probably he's had since that, maybe the best game he's had in 2 years, and how good Tyler's been this year and how the tight ends work at some of the offensive line, emphasis on that. But how everything's just come together, and Geno, the throws he's made, and he's getting better at like using his eyes. And there was just no scenario where I envisioned this. The defense, there was definitely scenarios where I could have envisioned things falling out because I just didn't see great personnel there. The front seven is pretty bad, but Geno is playing at a level like Dan Orlovsky was showing clips of some of the throws he was making last game, and Nate Tice, who's Mike Tice's son, has a really cool clips if you haven't seen his Twitter on just some of the stuff he's doing. And for me, like I wasn't even able to appreciate it at the time because I was so mad at the defense. And like finally on Monday, it sort of clicked. Like this guy played an unbelievable game, and Waldron's doing a great job. Like he ran some really cool Shanahan concepts last game, and Nate Tice kind of showed a couple of those. Like one was to get Noah Fant open. So to me, like how the offense has just fully come together. Oh, here we go. To me, that's by far the biggest surprise.
I'm sorry.
For people
Sorry,
that are
I'm
gonna
sure
listen
that's a
to
very
this
good
show and
point.
not
Definitely
watch it.
making.
Yeah.
Nathan Ernst is back and tried to hold the same expression, but couldn't quite do it.
It's hilarious, Nathan. Nice job. All right. Hey, Nathan, you're going to get a Patreon question.
Oh boy.
And hi, welcome back, sir. This is from Imani. It says, what's more impactful to Seattle's success in 2023? A top-end defensive piece in the draft, or trading down for a boatload of draft picks at positions of need? And then they said, again, we have 35 players signed once free agency starts, but we also lack a front seven game wrecker.
You know, I mean, the obvious answer is it just comes down to how you use the picks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like trading down, if you grab picks that get you Tariq Woolen, is always the right answer. And, you know, staying where you are and drafting, I don't know, I'm struggling to think of a recent bust, but, you know, Danny Shelton, where did Danny Shelton go? He went in the top half of the first round, right? Or somewhat high, whatever. Anyways, you do that, it's bad, right? So, yeah, I mean, if you can trade down and you can use the picks well, that's going to serve this team the best, right? Like, but they are going to be in a position where, you know, if they trade down, it's very possible that they're passing on a Will Anderson or a Jalen Carter. And, Jalen Carter is not Aaron Donald. Will Anderson is not Khalil Mack. But I think both of those players are going to be very good, and you have a chance to get a blue chipper out of both of those. And that's hard. I mean, yeah, you can find Richard Sherman, or potentially, we could be talking about Tariq Woolen the same way in a few years. But when you're that high in the draft, it's hard for me to say that you should trade down if one of those really elite, best in the class type guys are still there.
I want to ask that, if I can, Dan, a little bit differently, because I was, this is a really interesting question. I'm curious. So another way, Nathan, like if you could have one all pro meaning like top 2 or 3 at that position in the NFL, or you could have, let's say, 1 or 2 Pro Bowlers, and a starter, an average starter. Which would you prefer?
I don't know. It's hard. I mean, like not all Pro Bowlers. All right. I mean, not all Pro Bowlers are created the same, but I think, I get the intent of your question. I don't know. That's a really hard question, I think, and I don't know what the right answer is. But I guess the thing that I would fall back on is when you trade down, you just give yourself more chances. And there are Rich Shermans and Cam Chancellors and Michael Bennett's, and those guys are out there later in the draft. And so, like, my preference is almost always to trade back and get more picks and give yourself more chances. But you don't have a lot of times where you're sitting there talking about the number 1 in the class and a guy that people have been talking about, or defensive tackle. Both these guys, Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, people have been talking about them for 2 years now, and that's exciting. So it is hard to just like ignore that, right?
Dayna or Jeff, do you have a strong feeling on that particular? Like, if you were team building, which way you would go? Jeff, you look like you're dying to say. What's your thought?
My answer is Nathan's probably right, and I'm probably wrong. But to me, I'm going to go with the All-Pro, and especially if it's like a defensive line, blue chip, like if it's a premium position like that, because guys like that are force multipliers, and they make other people better, and they're blocked differently. Like if you look at what Nick Bosa's done to San Francisco, and what they were with almost the same players the year before, and how he was able to unlock like Eric Armstead, and how he made Fred Warner better. And like, you're not going to get Nick Bosa all the time. So it's probably tough to make that comparison. But even like the Jets, they had the same scheme, and then Quentin Williams is now having the year of his life, and add Sauce Gardner, and all of a sudden that whole team looks totally different. So to me, if you can get like an all-pro defensive lineman and how that impacts everyone else, to me, that's so rare. Like if you're getting 3 Pro Bowl players, that's probably the right answer. Let's be honest. Like this team needs 3 players. They don't need 1. But how many times they might never get into the top 5 again in the rest of like this regime. So I think like if you're in a position where if you can get one of those 2 guys, I think you have to take them. If you get down 1 pick below, I think you have to trade down. So it's that thin of a margin to me.
Yeah,
I think
Dayna.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I definitely don't think that you're wrong there, Jeff. I think the only thing for me here is that we're not talking about, are you drafting Aaron Jones, or would you take Aaron Jones? Oh my gosh, Aaron Donald.
Nathan's always thinking about running backs.
Don't draft Aaron
Jones. If you told me, would you take like Aaron Donald and a quality starter like Cody Barton, let's say, or 2 Pro Bowlers? That's a different question, right? But we're talking about draft picks. We're talking about draft picks. And so,
and that's why you're probably right.
Yeah, that changes the math for me a bit, because none of these guys are guarantees. But I think the force multiplier idea, like I do buy into that. And so if you're talking about sure things over draft picks, then that changes my opinion, I think.
Dayna,
the only thing I would add to that, because I kind of agree with both of you, it's just hard, right? Like you don't know. I'm getting to the point where I really just want them to take the best player available because they didn't for so long. And I want to see kind of what they can do with that. But I will say this. I think it's going to depend, at least I would hope it would depend on what their free agency looks like. The beauty of the draft is it is a full month after free agency starts, right? And so you can go in and see what kind of pictures that you want, see what kind of players that you want, not pictures, not baseball, sorry, and see if they're available and see who you can actually get on your team, because I do think that does change your draft strategy quite a bit. And so if they can get a couple of those key positions with some really good free agents, I think that helps them kind of clear that picture a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, there's too many fun things going on right now. Here's the thing for me, and generally I would take the All-Pro. Like I agree with what you said, Jeff. The one thing for me this year is I want to see what happens with the combine. Everyone's talking about Jalen Carter and Will Anderson as if they are miles better than the other defensive line prospects. I think there's some other pretty interesting prospects, and I'd be curious after the combine and after more time, how things shake out. Because if you could move down 3 or 4 picks or 5 picks, depending on if you're going like from 2 to 7, there's ways you could pick up another first next year. You'd have to trade additional picks probably later, swap things around. But the idea of having 2 firsts next year, especially if it's with a team that you have a decent chance to get another top 10 pick, and you could end up with an All-Pro anyway. Yeah. Then I'm like, yeah, I'll take that.
Like San Francisco went 3 to 11-3, and that was 3 first-round picks.
Right.
So from a process standpoint, like what Nathan said is the right way to go. There's no doubt about it, because you don't know if Jalen Carter is going to be better than Brian Brees. Like the odds are you take Brian Brees and the 2 other players. So it's just hard for me to it would be very hard for me to swallow if they had a chance to get one of those 2 guys and they didn't. But I think going from 2 to 8 could get you another first-round pick for sure.
Yeah. All right, Dayna. I took us on a roundabout trip. Okay. You can take us back on track.
I'm a little pissed I didn't read the next question before I asked Nathan the last one. So, Brian,
I'll take 2. One. I can do 2 in a row.
No, you don't get this question.
Double it up.
You don't get this question, sir.
I answered anyways.
Don't you do it. All right, Brian.
Yes.
With our curse of injured running backs and our next man up mentality, you're such an ass. Who do you think is going to be an impact to the team if K9 is out this week? Just go ahead and say Travis Homer. Sorry, go ahead.
I think he's out too.
No, he practiced a little bit today.
Did he practice today? I know he's got a knee. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Homer played, people forget the year that Marshawn came back. Homer was our running back for that period of time. And he had some moments of fine play. Like the guy can be fast. He's put on some muscle. He's not someone that's going to make many people miss. So he needs the line to block well. And that's honestly the bigger answer, Dayna, is K9's been in there and hasn't been getting yards because the line's been blocking for shit in the run. So I think, not to be Nathan Ernst, but I think the bigger impact on the run game right now is the offensive line, and the running backs. Probably there's not a huge difference. I think you saw Kenneth Walker at least break one run where he went beyond what it was supposed to do and went in a different direction. And he has that potential, and these other guys probably don't. But I'm always for bring me the undrafted free agent that's been on the practice squad that has young legs and is playing for his career and trying to put tape out there. Those guys will run their asses off. And a lot of times they have fresh legs. So I prefer that in some ways to some of these other guys.
All right. Jeff, you're next. What's the one? Oh, this is from Braxton. Oh, I'm sorry. That last question was from Hunter Hatch. This one's from Braxton. What's the one player on the Seattle squad that you think has gone from 0 to hero other than Geno?
0 to hero. I'll give this one guy credit. Marquise Goodwin has made a lot of big plays this year. And he was a guy like we thought was like a training camp body. We've spent a lot of time thinking like who's going to be the number 3 receiver. And I don't know how much like an upgraded third receiver would really elevate this offense just this year. And Goodwin's made like big. He made that catch to put them inside the 10-yard line. He had 2 touchdowns a couple games ago. He had a touchdown in the Tampa game. He was a guy I didn't think would contribute at all. So there aren't a lot because of just how bad the defense is, unless like Tariq because he was a 5th-round pick suits. The other answer would be Jason Myers because of how bad he was this year, and he's probably the best kicker in the league this year. But I don't want to talk about him. So we'll stick with Marquise Goodwin. He's a guy that I had zero expectations for. He's got a cool story, and like he's made big plays this year that I would not have expected.
Fair.
Can I throw out one more?
Sure.
Hero is probably strong, but like what Michael Jackson has done this year is pretty amazing to come in and be serviceable, right? I mean, like he was like the 7th cornerback on the depth chart last year, and I don't know where he was drafted, but it was pretty late, and it's just cool to kind of see him come in and like that dude's going to have a career in the NFL, and he'll play for a little while, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah. All right, the next one's from Jen Maz. Which player from the Broncos trade between Noah Fant and Shelby Harris has been more impactful and worth keeping as a long-term piece? Nathan.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. What?
Oh, why do you people not listen? You asked me to get these questions and nobody listens to me.
Complimenting me in the chat and I got distracted.
Oh, well, I can understand that. Okay, so which player from the Broncos trade between Noah Fant and Shelby Harris has been more impactful and worth keeping as a longer-term piece?
I mean, when you phrase it as longer term, I think it's got to be Fant just based on age, right? But I'm also not sure that Fant hasn't like had more of an impact than Shelby Harris, which I'm a little loath to admit, and also just like I think that's a surprise, right? I mean, Shelby Harris was, I think, I mean, no offense, the bigger name because he's the 1st-round pick and everything, but I think Shelby Harris was the guy that we probably looked at as more of an actual contributor. So yeah, I think Fant. No knock on Shelby, but I think Fant's probably, especially if you're saying longer term, the guy I would go with there.
Yeah, he's had some.
Really quick question for all of you or anyone that feels strongly. So there's a couple pretty good tight ends in this draft. There's one who's like projected top 15, top 12. Let's say it's not going to happen, but let's say you could get a guy like that. Would you? Like, do you feel like the tight end position's in good enough shape that you wouldn't want to upgrade it? If like there is like a Travis Kelce type, tight end available?
I don't know that there'll ever be another Travis Kelce though. I mean,
Sure.
It's hard. No, I mean, it's hard to think of tight ends as that important because they're only really that important on one team. Like, let's be honest, right? It's only
really.
I mean,
well,
George
no,
Kittle
and
oh no, I mean Travis Kelce is the Chiefs' offense 90% of the time, right? So you have to leave when you're talking about him. Now, Kittle is great, and you've had some other good players, but I don't know that with the players that the tight ends that they have, Colby Parkinson actually has been playing pretty well, and they've had, Will Dissly. I don't know that I would waste that high of a pick on a tight end. I just don't know that.
That's what I was kind of curious about.
Yeah. All right. So, we have another draft question. Maybe we'll wait on that one. Zach Hassan. Are the Seahawks an average to above average defense away from being legit contenders? Also, why does Nathan hate Geno? Brian, I'm gonna let you answer this because Nathan's not here.
You should give that to Jeff. I want to hear
you go.
Oh, absolutely.
I think
they've been playing awful defense, and they have a winning record. I know they played good defense during that 4-game winning streak, but really, if you look at the teams around the league, like how many of them in the NFC have better offenses than Seattle right now? It's probably just Philadelphia. But Seattle's defensively, compared to the other 3 contenders, which are Philadelphia, Dallas, and San Francisco, are playing very, very good defense, and Seattle's playing very, very bad defense. And it's why if you talk to all of us realistically, none of us think the team can do any noise. So for the team to become a Super Bowl contender, they have to pair a good offense or be elite at offense. I don't know if we'll ever get that high, but they're pretty good at offense this year. But they're just so bad on defense right now. it's hard to take them seriously, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's exactly a good way of describing them. And you look at the teams that win the Super Bowl, a lot of them do have either average or they're good pass rushing teams, or they are elite on defense. So you don't see a lot of teams with terrible defense win the Super Bowl. Like Aaron Donald and Von Miller pretty much won the Super Bowl themselves last year. And I think that's a great way to classify where things are.
You can ask Nathan that last part of the
Nathan,
question.
Zach wants to know why you hate Geno.
Just Gino knows what he did, and when he's ready to apologize, we'll talk.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, KDB. She wants to know, what are your thoughts? Brian, I'm going to give this one to you. What are your thoughts on the Rams claiming Baker Mayfield off waivers, and how do you think this will impact the look of the NFC West moving forward?
Honestly, it has no impact on the NFC West, other than there was no opportunity for him to go to the 49ers, but the 49ers didn't put in a claim. So implications are the 49ers are happy with Brock Purdy. They've been hyping him up. There's like Trent Williams talking about today that like he treats me like he's Peyton Manning. He tells me to shut the bleep up and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And you wouldn't know that he's a 7th round rookie or whatever. So I've seen 49ers, like not beat writers, but guys that cover the 49ers that are at training camp have full on like slap fights on Twitter about whether Brock Purdy was like good in training camp and nobody knew it. And so I think the 49ers are going with Brock Purdy. And so then Baker Mayfield to the Rams actually becomes a little bit interesting next year. We don't know what's happening with Matthew Stafford. Had the spinal cord contusion. He's had a couple head injuries. We'll see like what happens there. He wasn't good this year, even before those injuries. And with Wolford, like Wolford's not the guy. Bryce Perkins is not the guy. Baker Mayfield, like he couldn't have found a better home. Like there's a lot of very easy throws in Sean McVay's system. So yeah, maybe the Rams fell into a lifeboat. I guess that's the only thing that we'll have to see.
The interesting thing with the Rams is their quarterback for next year, I don't think is on their roster right now. I really believe that Matt Stafford will retire at the end of this year. I don't think Baker will catch on unless he's okay with a backup role. I think that what's funny to me about the Rams, and as I've been watching this team over all these years, is the fact that they are now in a position where they really need to move up to get a quarterback, and they've given away all their capital to do it. And so this is the spot we all predicted the Rams would be in at some point. I think it came a little earlier than we thought it was going to be. But they're kind of hosed because they have no draft capital. They have nothing. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to see what happens. That's going to be a fascinating team to watch next year.
Baker's a free agent after the year.
Yep.
So he's got like a 6-week tryout. But weirdly, we have to cheer for the Rams potentially in the next couple of weeks, because we don't want them passing us in the draft. So
I feel like I got more confident that the Rams have a chance to win that game against the Broncos than based on this last game.
Yeah, me too.
Like Broncos defense is not the Seahawks defense or anywhere in the same zip code or hemisphere. But the Broncos offense is also not in the same hemisphere as the Seahawks offense. So all they need to do is score like 17 points.
That's it.
To be able to win. So I don't know. I'm hopeful. And Aaron Donald should be back by then as well.
Hopefully. All right. So I'm going to call it there on Patreon. We have a few more that I missed. I'm sorry, but they're really long, complicated questions. And so since we're already at an hour, I figured I'd better stop. So thank you, everyone. There was a lot of questions this week. They were good ones.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Patreon.com/hawkblogger. You can join and ask your questions as well. And we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can within the show. Really, you should send bribes to Dayna, sometimes Nathan, who take care of choosing which questions we ask. Let's turn our attention to this Panthers matchup, folks. We talked about it a little bit as part of the patron chat. What are you expecting to see this weekend? Like, we've seen this Seahawks defense go from the worst in the NFL to the best in the NFL to the worst in the NFL. And that's not even hyperbole. Like, that's real. It's not been like mild swings or mild improvement. It's been massive improvement and massive regression. Do they have another like swing in them? Nathan, I'm going to start with you. Actually, Dayna, I'm going to start with you because you just asked all these questions. I want to give you a chance to answer one. So
sure.
Is it like in the realm of possibilities that the Seahawks defense becomes good again? Or is it just who we have?
Hell if I know. Do any of us know? Because seriously, it just depends on the wind, on what they ate for breakfast that day. Seriously, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I said earlier today on another podcast, this has been the most roller coaster defense that we've had in so long. Bad, good, bad, good, bad, good. And so it's hard to know who's going to show up. And I think that they learned a little bit from last week, hopefully. But the tackling problems are still there. All the problems are still there. And so I don't know. I think I think that they can beat the Panthers, although this division, like I said already, has been really difficult for Seattle this year. And I'm not really sure why that is. Looking to see how that no one wants to win that division this year. So I think it's kind of fascinating. But I still think that Sam Darnold is Sam Darnold. And so although he's looked better, he's still the same guy. And so I think the secondary could have a big impact on this. But if they don't calm down that run game, it's going to be a long day, I think. And so I think, yes, it is absolutely possible for this defense to step up. It's absolutely possible they fall apart again because we don't know this year.
Nathan, how are you approaching this game this weekend? Like, what are you like? Whatever. I'm just going to turn it on and see what happens. Are you like looking forward to something? Are you dreading something? Like, where are you mentally as you approach this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think Seattle has had a run now of some pretty bad teams. And Carolina is a bad team. And what I want to see is for them to, I mean, good teams should blow out bad teams, right? And so I don't need them to blow out Carolina, but I want something that looks better than what we've seen against the Rams and obviously what we saw against like the Raiders and Tampa. So I mean, that's kind of where I'm in. Like, I think they're very likely to make the playoffs just with math. But like, I want to see them control this game for most of it and not, struggle for like a half or whatever against a bad Panther team. Not that, struggling against them for a half would, be damning or something like that, but like, just kind of show us that you belong in the playoffs and that you're not just kind of falling backwards into it in a bad conference.
Jeff, scenario for you.
Sure.
The Seahawks go into the Panthers game determined to stop the run. They're like, we're going to make Sam Darnold beat us. And they actually succeed. They stop the run, but Sam Darnold beats them. How do you feel in that situation? Are you like, that was the right call? Are you like, God damn it? Like, how do you approach this game?
I think you have to try to combat them at the line of scrimmage because they really only have one like really, really good receiver, DJ Moore, who's had kind of a down year because of how bad their quarterbacking is. Sam Darnold's a guy who, like, you get him into third and long, he makes mistakes. We've seen the Seahawks play him before and do well. So I think the clear way Carolina can win this game is like they have one real threat to it. If Sam Darnold beats you, then frankly, you're just not good enough in general. But I think that's the plan you have to have. You have to try to get them into third and long. You have to try to not get them to get killed in the run. I think you have to try to stop the run because they're a pretty good line of scrimmage team. Their offensive line, which was really, really bad the last couple of years, has been really, really good. And they invested a lot of picks and a lot of free agent money. And They took one of the Rams guys. They took one of their guards, Austin Corbett. But if Sam Darnold beats you, it'll be pretty demoralizing for sure, especially as we're trying to convince ourselves that these guys might be in the playoffs. But I think that's the right game plan.
I'll get us back to the Panthers game, but as you guys were talking about, I was just thinking about the quarterback problems for the Panthers and that they did have Baker Mayfield. And I was thinking about all the quarterbacks that were rumored to Seattle this offseason. Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, Deshaun Watson for a minute before all that stuff broke. Like, who am I missing that was rumored to Seattle?
I will say the Watson rumor was not after or not before everything broke. Those rumors were, if they were true, Seattle would have gone into that very well knowing everything that had come out about him.
Interesting. But, I don't remember the sequence perfectly, but that
possible. Malik Willis.
Malik Willis. Yeah, like
so far from an NFL quarterback.
Drew Lock,
Pickett. That was, he was the first quarterback taken. How much, like someone mentioned in chat, the Seahawks dodged actually I think it was Trey in our chat mentioned that the Seahawks dodged a bullet on Baker Mayfield. They dodged a hail of bullets. It was like a 1920s like Tommy gun of bullets coming at the Seahawks, and they matrixed their way around all of those, and they ended up with a unicorn like stallion and Geno Smith. It is like one of the most wild, like even the Geno thing all by itself is wild, but when you zoom out to all the possible multiverse of possibilities that could have been, including Russ staying, by the way, another bullet. It's remarkable. Like, it is like boggles my mind how we are here. And I am very, very grateful that we are. There could have been a lot more boring and tedious seasons to cover than the one we've got.
I don't know though. So I mean, the Russ thing obviously dodged a bullet is one way to say that. I think they were, Schneider by all accounts was pretty aggressive in making that happen. But like, do you think that if they had brought in any of those guys, other guys that you mentioned, that Geno wouldn't have won the competition in the end? Like, I think this is like, we should probably give Pete some credit here where like, I think clearly he saw something in Geno leading up to this. And I think that if, they had gone out and gotten one of these guys to compete with Geno, I'm pretty sure Pete would have picked Geno.
I think that's a really interesting thought. I don't know that Geno would have been re-signed. I think they would have made the trade. They would have had Drew Lock, and Drew Lock would have been competing with one of these people.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the sequencing there doesn't matter.
But you're right. I mean, I don't have the same faith that you do. I don't know that Geno would have won. I think if they had made another trade or signed a guy that they expected to be the starter, who knows? Well, thankfully, we'll never know. But there's not one of those guys that I would prefer to what we've got right now. That's for sure. All right, let's go round robin, talk about predictions for this weekend. Dayna, I'm going to start with you.
Mm-hmm.
What will be the score of this game, and who will be the winner?
Well, I mean, Deontay Freeman, he is injured. I mean, they expect him to play, but he has said he's not 100%. He was injured during their bye week. And so he'll be on the field, but how impactful that will be, I don't know. Especially if the defense manages to get it together for this run defense just a little bit. So I was looking back over the Panthers schedule and what they won by, and they just are so hot and cold. They get 30 points and the next week they get 3. I mean, it just makes no sense, to be quite honest with you. So I'm just going to kind of go middle of the road. I think Seattle wins this one, especially because they're at home. I think Seattle wins it. I'm going to say 24-15.
Nathan.
I think that Seattle does rebound a bit. they won last week and Gino played well and everything, but I think that they just look a little bit more like a playoff team against a very bad team this week. And I think it's 34-23. They're going to have some issues. I'm fully anticipating DJ Moore doing something incredibly stupid against this team, and it's raging about the defense. But I think that they will pretty comfortably win this.
Jeff,
I got a bad feeling about this game. They're really good at the line of scrimmage. Seattle's really bad at the line of scrimmage. I'm hoping I'm way off. I'm hoping my instincts are way off because remember in October, Brian, you were talking about like how nothing's gone wrong. Things need to go right. Something needs to go wrong here. Everything's moving. Like to Nathan's point earlier, they were killing teams. And how many times with Pete Carroll we said, like, why can't they do this? And it was 4 games in a row. And then the last month, they've looked like shit. And they were in these games. They could have won the Raiders game. Last week was a toss-up, but like they don't look like a playoff team. They look pretty bad. Until I see anything different, I'm uneasy with how they match up against a team that's really good at the line of scrimmage, in spite of how bad their quarterback is. And it's until I see differently. Yeah, I'm going to say 23-20 Carolina. I hope I'm way off. Seattle should win this game at home, and I want to see some pass rushing. But until I see something differently, my gut instinct, unfortunately, right now is a loss. That would be pretty demoralizing.
The interesting thing is I remember in our chat, it would be the most Seahawk thing ever to lose to Carolina and beat the Chiefs on Christmas Eve. Like, right? Yeah. Like, that's just how this team
100%.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my response then is the same as now. They've already done the lose to Carolina bit. They lost to the Raiders. They lost to the Falcons. The
Raiders are better than you think. The Raiders are turning something around here.
No, it's true. I agree. Point being, like, I'm close to where you are, Jeff. I mean, that Tampa Bay loss, you know how that broke me in terms of like I got to the point where I was believing this team could be better than just, a playoff entrant, that maybe they could do something fun. That Tampa team is shit. And I'm hoping to God that somehow actually they're not. And this week against Brock Purdy, that they find a way to win. And if they win and the Seahawks win, then Thursday night football will be for first place in the NFC West against the 49ers, which would be fun. We're going to get 2 home games in the course of 4 days in Seattle, which is cool. Now, I look at what happened with Tampa. I look at what happened with Denver. I look at what happened with the Rams. 3 teams I don't have a lot of respect for. And then the only thing keeping me from like being clearly picking the Panthers is that the Seahawks did seem to find a little bit of traction in the defense. Like it wasn't just a total jailbreak against the Rams, but pretty bad. So my tendency is to pick the Panthers, and I think I'm just going to go with that. And I think I'm going to pick the Panthers are going to win this game 25-17. And we will see. I hope that I am wrong, same as Jeff, and I will be super happy to be wrong if that's what happens. I'll be at this game. I'll be at the Thursday game, screaming my head off, and hopefully that will help somebody.
It's a Thursday game?
Monday, and then the 49ers is a Thursday game.
Oh, it's a Monday game?
Sorry, Sunday, and then come on, you're such a pain in the. What do you give me crap?
No, I honestly don't know what day.
No, it's a Sunday game and then a Thursday game.
So they play Sunday.
Yes,
we have to play the Niners on a short week.
Yeah.
For Christ's sake. Okay.
They have to play us on a short week. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, that's what I meant.
And they have to travel all the way up from the North Bay.
No,
actually, the South Bay.
I can't with that team right now.
I know.
Maybe I'm really hoping, as I said to you guys before, that Purdy, just had his Matt Flynn moment and got his 1,000,000 touchdowns, and now he's just going to fall apart. That's all we can hope for, right?
Purdy's kind of legit in Iowa State. He's an Iowa State legend.
Iowa State.
He looks competent, but teams are going to study him now. So this week will be really telling.
Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about, oh, he didn't throw it past like 5 yards downfield. Have you seen the Kyle Shanahan offense? Jimmy Garoppolo destroyed the Rams without ever throwing it past the line of scrimmage. Like,
He can do that.
That's how Kyle Shanahan coaches, and he makes it really easy on quarterbacks. So I'm with you, Dayna. The 49, because the NFC looks like such shit. The 49ers, I think if you like, I've often said that the best side of the ball in the NFL, whichever is the most dominant side of the ball, wins the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can make the case that the 49ers defense is the most dominant side of the ball in the NFL this year.
Yep.
They're not necessarily the most complete team, but that defense is up there.
It's insane.
Yeah. I remember the first week when I saw Hufanga against the Bears, and I was like, oh no, they don't get to have him be good. Like, that sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm dreading that game.
I know.
Yeah.
That might be one I skip. You guys know how I am.
I think we'll talk about that game soon enough, but like, I like our receivers in that game. That's one thing about that defense that does struggle. Their corners are not great, and they're injured. I think the Seahawks can make some hay there, but we'll see. We'll see. I would honestly maybe take a win over the 49ers and a loss to every other team. Like, if I could have, like, I might take that. I don't know. Yes. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for staying late. Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG. Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. You can find them all there. I highly recommend it. And thank you to the folks on chat that joined. Thank you to the Patreons that helped make our donation this year possible. $40,000 to NAMI, which brings our total charitable donations over all the years from Real Hawk Talk and Hawk Blogger to $240,000, which ain't nothing. And appreciate all of your contributions. Appreciate the folks on the show. And let's do more. We got more to do. We got more Seahawks to talk. We'll see you, hear you, discuss with you in the post-game show on Sunday. Yes, Sunday against the Panthers. All right. Take care, everybody. Go Hawks.